Thank you, everyone, for making our meeting this afternoon in the UK, this morning in Mexico. We're just waiting for a couple of minutes to allow those colleagues who have registered to join, and we should be with you in a couple of minutes. Thank you. So this is the time now for our seminar. We are just going to wait. I was just saying a minute ago, we are going to wait for a couple of minutes. So if you just bear with us, thank you for joining us. Bear with us for just one more minute while we allow other colleagues to connect, and we'll be with you shortly. Thank you. So let's make start. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. Good afternoon in the UK and good morning in Mexico. My name is Jacqueline Priego, and I am delighted to welcome you all to this dialogue seminar, which is the first in a series of two that we, the University of Portsmouth and FLACSO-Mexico, will be hosting this month. A bit of housekeeping before we start. This event is being recorded for the purposes of record keeping, and a video may be published after the event. So I hope that's okay with all of you. If not, you can contact the organizing team if this is not the case. Also, my colleague Jaina Hunt and I will be taking screenshots during the event to show on social media, and I hope that's okay. That's okay with everyone. Again, if this is not what you were expecting, just drop us a line on the chat privately, and we can take care of that. Now, a bit of background about these events. Well, under the auspices of the British Council Mexico, we are part of the project TNE as Capacity Strengthening, Social Research Methods for Sustainable Development. And this project seeks to establish a community of practice around TNE and micro-credentials in the context of international partnerships between Mexico and the United Kingdom. The project team, which I have the pleasure and honor to lead alongside Professor Raúl Pacheco-Vega, who is also here and will be presenting, has organized these two virtual events to foster this community of practice I was just mentioning. And at the same time, we are organizing these events to respond to needs recently reported by Mexican higher education institutions. And this has been recently identified by the British Council and ANUYES in an annex to the guide on TNE partnerships in Mexico, originally published by the British Council. Now, the regulatory and operational landscape for all of us who are interested in implementing partnerships between higher education institutions in the UK and Mexico is a key element that universities in Mexico have identified as in need of capacity building. And this is precisely the topic that we are going to discuss today. Now, without further ado, thank you again to those of you who have just recently joined. I am going to give the floor to Arturo Mendoza, who is the head of higher education at the British Council Mexico, for an introduction to TNE and its particular place in the internationalization agenda. Arturo, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and thanks for the invite. And I'm very happy to be here with you. I'm going to be sharing my screen. I don't know if I already got the authorization. Yeah, do I? Yeah, perfect. So just let me know once you can see my screen, please. Is it there then?
You have, yes, it is there.
Perfect. So Perfect. So, briefly, as Jacqueline mentioned, the purpose of this presentation is to share with you some idea of the work that we are doing in the British Council on Transnational Education, which is our strategy and which is the framework of our collaboration with Portsmouth and FLACSO. So, to begin with, all of our work is basically based on the demands from both Mexico and the UK in the area of access to higher education, enabling more spaces for students from both Mexico and the UK to lead internationalization through different delivery models, including distance learning, including joint dual programs. So, for that same reason, it has been very important for us at the British Council to expand the awareness that both countries have of the opportunities to collaborate internationally or specifically in transnational education. And in the area of work, strategic work with the UK, as many of you know, our guiding principle has been the international education strategy that has the main purpose to increase not only the number of international students from Mexico in the UK, but also to increase the number of TNE collaborations with Mexico and globally. Now, in terms of our specific strategic framework in the British Council, we have a TNE strategy that was launched in 2023 and goes until this year. The purpose of this strategy is obviously to build on the UK's international education strategy, but also to provide better data and insights of TNE opportunities with Mexico and globally, and also for us to understand the local context and frameworks that there are to collaborate internationally. And in order to have actionable plans and work towards these objectives, we have our flagship Going Global Partnership Program that receives granting aid from the UK government to basically support partnerships such as the one that we are seeing right now between FLACSO and Portsmouth, with the main objective to build towards these strategies and these priorities. Now, in terms of what we've done to provide better data and insights, the British Council since 2022 has been working in the design of specific reports and insights to build on the awareness about what's TNE and what's the delivery models that Mexico and the UK might consider in terms of delivering joint curricula or joint programs for Mexican and British students. So there is all this information available for free. Jacqueline and Raúl after this session will share with all the participants these slides so you can have access to the links and to the reports. Now, Jacqueline was very, very clear when saying, when asking to the British Council, please talk us a little bit more about which have been the main findings from these reports in terms of TNE and the delivery models that have been observed to be not only present in the UK-Mexico ecosystem, but also more actionable in the short term. And it's clear for us that based on those insights and data, that right now in Mexico, collaborating in areas such as distance and online learning and dual degrees not only present because they're already observed in many higher education institutions across Mexico, but also are the more actionable programs or projects that can be delivered by UK institutions in collaboration with Mexican partners. There may be other delivery models that can be considered for future iterations, or once there is more general awareness of which is the regulatory frameworks that there are in Mexico and the UK. But again, online learning, distance learning, and dual degrees have proven to be the more successful and present delivery models in terms of TNE with Mexico. Also, one of the amongst the key findings that we've seen in from these data and reports that we've produced since 2022 have been, and I'm only going to focus on some of these because there are lots of lessons learned from this data and insights that I strongly recommend you read them thoroughly. But based on what we are observing and particularly considering the nature of the relationship between Portsmouth and FLACSO, I think it's worth saying that amongst the key findings and lessons that we've seen is that we really need to keep encouraging higher education institutions in working towards detailed partnership frameworks, building cross-functional team leads in T&E and internationalization, conducting capability and needs assessment. And all of these are, elements that we've seen in many of the HE Connects projects that we've funded since 2023, in which you have, projects that have been mapping curricula and credits to think about potential joint programs. And there are others, for example, such as Portsmouth and FLACSO, that are enabling communities of practice to discuss about the many opportunities that there are in T&E and also the challenges regarding regulation and frameworks that we are seeing both in Mexico and in the UK. In order to have an actionable plan to take those insights and data into real life and into practice, we basically created HE Connects grants, and we're very happy that Portsmouth and FLACSO are basically using this resource that we put for them, for higher education institutions, to build on these discussions and work towards these priorities and objectives that I've outlined at the beginning of the presentation. So right now, this call is open, and it's going to be open until July the 30th. It's open for higher education institutions to present their projects. So please do spread out this information so can others benefit from this call. Amongst the outcomes that we're expecting from HE Connects are all of these. I've highlighted in yellow the one of panels and events to feed into the awareness and improvement of national regulatory frameworks, because it's basically the one that is inspiring these dialogues that are being conducted by Portsmouth and FLACSO. But again, there are many other things that Portsmouth and FLACSO are covering, and you will learn about all of this in the next few minutes. Here is finally a list of all of the projects that we funded since 2023. There haven't been many because, as you know, funding it's not huge, but it's definitely meaningful, and it has been a very interesting seed funding for higher education institutions to enable this type of partnership. So, with no further ado, I'm going to stop here, and then over to you, Jacqueline. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arturo. And I have expressed this on social media, and I'm going to say it here publicly. This project, I think Raúl could support me in this, has opened up opportunities and doors to us that we didn't expect at the beginning of this journey. So I would encourage anyone who's interested to attend the information session tomorrow. But in the meantime, we are going to carry on with this session. And I should have said at the beginning that we are going to have all of our presenters who have kindly agreed to be with us today in the order that we have on the agenda. And then by the end of presentations, we are going to have a Q&A session in which we are going to be able to have, hopefully, a very stimulating discussion. So thank you so much, Arturo, for the representation of the British Council here. And the next, I would like to welcome the intervention of Adán Martínez, who is the Director of Interinstitutional Relations at Mexico's System for the Evaluation and Accreditation of Higher Education. The acronym is SEAES in Spanish, which is part of Mexico's Ministry of Public Education. Adán will present on the current legal framework and resignification of assessment and continuous improvement in Mexico, as well as the national qualifications framework in the country. Over to you, Adán. We have the slides, so Jaina can run them for you and according to your pace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. And thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to make this presentation for you. I will try to be very executive and show some of the highlights of the system. And I think there's going to be a place for questions after the presentation, I think, I don't know, but I will be available for you. Next, please. So we're going to review the legal framework of the system in terms of be executive. I will say, I will reduce the term SEAES for system, the design of a public-based and collective participation, the system and the resignification of assessment. We made a change here. We changed evaluation for assessment. I think it's more properly, is more correct the term. And the assessment of a continuous improvement cycle that shows some of the results we have and shows some of the progress we have made since the installation of the system in 2023. And we're going to make some final reflections of the system and review a little bit the National Qualifications Framework and National System of Credit Allocation, Accumulation, and Transfer. Next, please. So the legal framework of the system consists in, first of all, the 6th article of General Law on Higher Education that establishes the purpose of the system and actually the obligation of every higher education institution for make a self-assessment of their processes, mechanisms, and other elements for continuous improvement. And then there is a higher education evaluation and accreditation policy that establishes the conceptual foundations for its implementation and action lines. There, in that document, we established the national agenda of the system, and we're trying to maintain the conceptual foundations that you will find in the general framework of the system. Then there is another document that is called the SEAES guidelines that establishes the system guidelines in order to establish the integration, operation, and articulation of the system. And the main document that the higher education institutions take into account to make the self-assessment is the general framework of the system that establishes the operational basis and actually the main concepts and the methodologies to make a very good self-assessment. And there are another documents that you can actually, this presentation is for you, it's designed for you, and this for this moment. I will ask Jacqueline to share it with you, because there are some links for these documents that you can review whenever you want. So there are bases for articulation of some organisms that make external assessments and accreditation. So we're trying to articulate those institutions to the system in order to work in the same direction we're working in the public agenda. And there is a call for institutional self-assessment. I will show and I will say some of this call for institutional assessment in the next slide. Please, the next. So since the installation of the system in 2022, actually in 2021 with the General Law on Higher Education, there were some progress in the installation of the system, through many mechanisms, but the main one is that the general law on higher education establishes the creation of the system and assumes the leadership over higher education assessment and accreditation policies. So that becomes a public policy based on law system, and the system becomes a public entity responsible for coordination of actors and actions. These actors are the higher education institutions, local governments, of course, the federal governments through the Undersecretary of Higher Education, the direction of the system that is well, considers all the actors in these systems, and other actors, actually the institutions that make accreditation and external assessment. Next, please. So the relationship between core concepts and lines of action establishes, first of all, the reconceptualization of assessment. So that means that we're trying to make a change between evaluation or assessment only in terms of assessment or with the final goal of assessment, but the final goal is established by continuous improvement. So there are many other concepts like professional development for education assessment, promotion of institutional, interinstitutional cooperation, for example, between higher education institutions, local governments, federal governments, and all the actors that are considering the system. And there is a constant accompaniment and strengthening of institutional capacities that we guide through many, of course, the general framework of the SEAES, and we make advice and support for higher education institution well, that is continuous. Next, please. So we're trying to make a distinction between the paradigms of educational assessment, and that is the difference between accountability and continuous improvement. Well, first of all, we placed an emphasis on the purpose. The main difference is on the purpose between verification, accomplishment, and supervising and control. So we're placing an emphasis on guidance, collective action, on understanding and construction of knowledge, and give meaning to practice and commitments. So the difference is placed in many terms, in the purpose, in the main approaches of the system, in the reference frameworks and uses, and of course in the epistemology and methods. You will find this difference in the general framework of the system, and well, that is the resignification of assessment for higher education. Next, please. So there is social transformation horizon and agenda in establishing the system. First of all, is based on the transversal criteria that I will mention in 2 slides, and the areas of higher education that actually there are 5 areas, not 6, as you can see in the lower part of the slide. So there are only 6 higher education areas in the institution of higher education. And this transformation is guided by the transversal criteria in order to place a social transformation horizon, because the institutions are trying to make progresses in many of these transversal criteria in the institution in order to articulate make progress on this transversal criteria. I will show in detail later. Please, the next one. So there is an assessment and improvement cycle that actually shows the progress we have made so far in the system. And what I will try to show in this slide is the importance of this cycle. It all started in 2023 with the first call for institutional self-assessment. There is a call every year. Actually, there was a call in 2024, and there was a call in 2025. Actually, in the 30th of May 30th, and then there is. We have advanced. We have made progresses in every phase. You can see here in phase 2. There are included the assessments of state systems. Actually, that's the local governments through their some committees that were installed for these purposes, and then the phase 3 that includes the assessment of the subsystems that are represented in the Undersecretary of Higher Education, and then in 2024. We made the National System of Higher Education Assessment to conclude in 2024 with the meta-evaluation of the system. Right now, we're making progress on the phase 6 that represents the reflection and systematization of every result on these phases. So this cycle repeats and starts again in 2026. So there is a call every year for self-assessment. There is a call every year for assessment of the state systems, for the systems and institutions that haven't participated before. So if there is a question, you can ask for us in the when I conclude my participation. Next, please. Oh, this is the transversal criteria that is represented by 7 criteria: social responsibility, social and gender equity, inclusion, vanguard, excellence, social innovation, and interculturality. And they are transversal for these elements of higher education, these areas: vocational training, teachers' professionalization, educational programs, research and postgraduate programs, and higher education institution. And the 6th one, actually, yeah, there's a 6th one, but it must be separated, is the higher education system, subsystems, and state systems and policies. Next, please. Okay, so we have some results in the progress of the assessment of, and improvement of the cycle. In phase 1, with the calls for institutional self-assessment, we have 727 higher education institutions participants between 2023 and 2024. That represents, just a minimum part of the national system of higher education, but in terms of impact in the students, it is we've made some progress because we have impact approximately 70% of the students of higher education in Mexico. And then we have the registry for peers for diagnostic and formative assessment. We have approximately 2,000 evaluator peers that participates making the assessment for the reports of every higher education institution. And we have we make this kind of continuous support and training program, and we have made more than 100 activities between 2003 and 2024, 23 and 2024. And then we have the process of the articulation of external assessment bodies that we call IEVA, and we have 7 of them published in the registry for IEVA articulated with SEAES. That means that these 7 institutions or organisms are working in the same direction that the framework, the general framework of the system establishes. So they have placed 87 harmonization commitments that we can verify in the page of the undersecretary. All this information is public, of course, and you can verify every word I'm saying in the final presentation, and actually in the links you're going to see at the end of this presentation. In the assessment of state systems that I was telling you, the local governments make the self-assessment of their higher education systems. We had the participation of 26 states in 2024, and the rest of them are participating right now in 2025. So we have completed the 100% of the country participating in this exercise that actually represents that every local government is evaluating or self-evaluating their own higher education systems. Next. I told that we have completed the subsystem assessment in 2024, and every executive coordination and disconcentrated administrative body of the Undersecretary of Higher Education carried this assessment, and we have completed this phase in 2024. The same for the phase 4, that we assessed, we evaluated aspects and elements of the context analysis of the national system of higher education. We reviewed plans, strategic objectives, policies, programs, and strategies, and many elements that you can find, and you will find in a document that will be published in the next months. That document contains the results of the evaluation of the national system of higher education. And of course, we made the evaluation of the system. We evaluated the components, the achievement of objectives, the execution of planned processes, outcomes, and other aspects that you can find here. Next, please. So we're placing the emphasis in the reframing assessment because it requires, of course, challenging conventional practices. We're making many emphasis on be critical in every institution of higher education about their institutional missions, purposes, and functions, expectations, accomplishments, and achievements, and of course, the particular context taking into account the general law on higher education, and the transversal criteria that represents the horizon of transformation of the system. We're trying to enhance the self-regulation of the system and the institutions, of course, the professionalism, responsibility, participation, and dialogue and deliberation. Next, please. Now, on the National Qualifications Framework and National System for Credit Allocation, Accumulation, and Transfer, in October 1st, 2024, the general guidelines of the National Qualification Framework were established, and these guidelines facilitate academic mobility, the recognition and certification of learning, and the transit, permanence, and graduation of the students within the national education systems. The main topics are covered in legal framework, educational levels and learning outcomes, national competence system, national system for the assignment, accumulation, and transfer of academic credits, the monitoring committee for the NQF and the national system for assignment, accumulation, and transfer academic credits. Next, please. There you have the processes of training, assessment, and accreditation for individuals, formal, non-formal, and informal learning. And you have the levels of this national system. Next, please. So there is a monitoring committee for the National Qualifications Framework that is composed of the heads of undersecretaries of basic education, upper secondary education, and higher education. There is a head of the Secretary of Public Education Office and the representative of CONOCER. That is an institution that takes this National Qualifications Framework. Its functions include the implementation of the MNC and the guidelines, particularly regarding their organization, operation, and development of assessment of descriptors. The committee will be initially chaired by the head of the Secretary of Public Education, and the technical secretariat will be held by General Direction of Accreditation, Incorporation, and Revalidation. That it's the acronym in Spanish, the CAIR. That will conform the committee in Mexico City. Next, please. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. There you have the link for the Undersecretary of Higher Education. You will find the documents I talked about here in the presentation, and there you will have the repository for videos and other material for the system. If you want to review some of the things that I said here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adán, for your presentation. I think in particular, the point about the National Qualification Framework and this point about allocation, accumulation, and transfer of credits is something very interesting for us, our project, and for other colleagues who may be considering applying, to the different iterations of funding from the British Council. So hopefully we can get back to that in the Q&A. Now, next, I would like to give the floor to Piers Wall, who is the head of International Quality Assurance and Enhancement at the UK's Quality Assurance Agency for Higher Education. Piers is going to present on the UK's frameworks for higher education qualifications and quality assurance for TNE. And so welcome, Piers, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and share my screen. that work? Can you see stuff?
It is working. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Let me just see if I get into SlideShare. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Jacqueline, for that introduction. I'm very happy to be here and be able to talk to you a little bit about how quality assurance, how transnational education is quality assured, and how that works within the UK context. So I'm going to give a little brief summary, a little bit of background, and cover a few areas, and then look at how the frameworks are developed. So a brief overview of the T&E scheme of T&E from a higher education perspective in the UK. I noticed Arturo talked a little bit about some of the types of T&E that are popular in Mexico or are working in Mexico, so we'll cover a little bit of those. And then I'll talk about how T&E is quality assured regardless of the type. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what's called the quality code that we have in the UK and how an aspect of that quality code is key to support providers in developing partnerships, running partnerships, and managing partnerships. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we call enhancement of T&E, which Adam was talking about, the continuous improvement. So for me, enhancement and continuous improvement almost mean the same things, really. So very briefly, on this slide, you can see some big numbers. So in the UK, transnational education is very, very important feature of higher education. We've got some very big numbers here, as you can see. And there are 173 UK institutions working in transnational education, or there were in 22-23. I suspect that number has increased since that data was produced, because there is political funding issues, regulatory issues in countries and in the UK have tended to mean that the transnational education developments can have a positive effect on how an institution operates. Not all institutions are big transnational education providers. Some have maybe one partnership, but others may have 50% of their students who are actually overseas transnational education. So it's a very wide and very varied market. There was some reference on that previous slide to sort of groupings, and Arturo touched a little bit on this. So basically, we group transnational education partnerships in order to acquire that data. And UK universities submit data to an organisation which is now called JISC, and that data is around their overseas work. And the sort of second column shows the way things are grouped. So something around collaborative, something around online, and the third column really lists some of those types of partnership or some of those transnational arrangements which exist. You can see there's mention of joint and dual degrees, which Arturo mentioned, but there's also mention of online delivery as well. There are many other methods, which I'm just going to come to now. So if you look at this slide, you can see there's a kind of overview of those groupings. Branch campuses are big organizations where in effect there is another campus which may be completely owned by the UK provider or maybe a joint ownership. There are those dual, double, joint programs which are becoming more and more popular from a UK perspective and from an international perspective. Talked about distance and online, and then there are franchise programs and validated programs. The difference around those is around who delivers, who controls the material, but ultimately those are still quality assured by the UK provider. The things in green are really other types of arrangement, and it's probably worth saying that from a definition point of view, transnational education is referred to for students who actually receive an award from an overseas provider, but do not go to the country of that provider. So they do not move across to the UK, for example. There are some arrangements where there's a bit of a hybrid, where some students are transnational, but some could move across. So we talk about progression and articulation agreements. Now, all of that's really interesting. How does that impact on the regulatory quality assurance world? So there are two considerations, and they're not surprising ones, really. You need to understand the regulatory framework where the provider operates in the UK. And I'm sure from a perspective, the UK seems like a small island, but I'll talk a little bit about how complex the higher education landscape is in the UK. So it's the UK regulations, but it's also the regulations and the frameworks in the country where that transnational education is taking place. So from a complexity point of view, there are two sets of regulations to be clear and follow, and that can make things quite complicated. So how is T&E actually quality assured in the UK? So the first bullet point talks about students being entitled to expect the same quality and standards as those studying within the UK. And their courses are subject to the same regulation. So often we get asked in our work, how is T&E different in terms of the quality assurance to the UK university? Well, the answer is it's not different. The expectation is that the quality, the standards of the course are the same, the regulation is the same, and in effect, we talk about a comparable experience for students. Clearly, if a student is studying on a transnational education program, whether it's in Mexico, whether it's in the UAE, the experience will be different. But what should be the same is that quality, the standards, and the way it's regulated. So that's quite a challenging, quite a high bar to meet. I talked about the UK being a complex landscape. So there's a map which identifies England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And the second bullet point talks about how those Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland have a kind of regulatory process where there are reviews on a cyclical basis. So every 3, 4, 5 years, there is a review of an institution, whether that's in Scotland or in Wales, and any transnational education partnership work would be included in that review. The QAA conducts those reviews for the governments in those countries. So transnational education, you have partnerships, they are included in that activity. In England, the situation is a little bit different. So there's a regulatory board called the Office for Students, and they have a slightly different approach. So it's not a cyclical approach. It's what's called a risk-based regulatory approach. And what that means is a selection is made. It's not done on every 4 or 5 years. And also, if the Office for Students has concerns, then they will conduct an activity. And T&E programs are included in that regulatory approach as well. So the UK may be quite small, but it's quite a complicated regulatory environment. On a practical level, what it means is if there's a university in Mexico partnered with a university in Scotland, the regulatory world will be slightly different to if the UK partner was in England. And that sounds not important, but it is quite different. And so it ends up being quite a key component of what happens. So the question is, the thing those all things have in common is that ultimately quality assurance has to be of the same level. Quality has to be the same, the standards have to be the same. So there is a common feature, whether it's England, Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland. So one of the frameworks, if you like, which the QAA is custodian of, if you like, is what's called the Quality Code. And the Quality Code is a sector-developed set of principles around all aspects of quality assurance in higher education. So on this slide, I'm just you can see kind of the areas that are covered through the Quality Code. So the Quality Code has different roles in those different regulatory worlds in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. But ultimately, it's not a you must. It's these are things you should consider if you are doing these things. So the approach is not really compliance-based, but more about support and developmental. You will see there are principles around strategic approach. It was interesting hearing Adam talk about the strategy and strategic approach of institutions. There's approaches to how you evaluate quality and standards within an institution. And there are also about quality enhancement and standards. So you can see Principle 8 is circled because Principle 8 is all around partnerships and the principles behind working with other organizations. Partnerships here does not just mean international partnerships. It could mean partnerships within the UK. So between a university in Wales, a university in Scotland, a college in England, a university in England. So it has a fairly broad coverage. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of information about those areas so you can see what we're looking at. So this is Principle 8. And Principle 8 is talking about operating partnerships with other organizations. So I'll let you read it, but basically you can see that there has to be some agreement about the arrangements for the governance of the partnership to ensure that the academic standards are secure, safe, high, and also to enhance the quality of programs and modules that are delivered. So this is about development, that kind of continuous improvement area that Adam was talking about. So this is kind of one of the areas of the principle. The other areas are that there has to be agreement around and communication about which organization is responsible for which bit, or different areas, or if both organizations are responsible. So that could be about the delivery, that could be about monitoring the programs, about evaluation, quality assuring, but also about enhancing. So in effect, this principle is saying, whichever part of the journey, partnership journey, whether you're at the beginning, the middle, or you're coming to the end, there has to be clarity over what is expected from which partner, and also has to be agreement about how that is being managed. So I'm probably going to say this a couple of times. Partnership is about two-way, not top-down. So the expectation is that partnerships are equal, beneficial, mutual. And that's kind of where this principle has come from. So it's probably worth saying we've revised the quality code in the last 12 months or so. So these new principles have been established and agreed. There are 6 key practices for this particular principle. I won't read through them all, but basically the first one talks about everybody needs to be clear, both partners, or more if there are 3 partners, about who is responsible for maintaining academic standards and quality, but also about enhancing those standards. So we're not just talking about meeting the baseline, we're talking about doing more than that. Providers should also be aware that working in partnership involves levels of risk. So this is really about the appetite for risk that an institution should have. And I would link that to that institutional strategy. If you're going to work in partnerships on transnational education as an institution, whether you're in Mexico or in the UK, you need to work out what risk you are prepared to take. Risk does not need to be a bad thing. It's just about understanding the risk and mitigating. And then the third one, C, really talks about making sure there are proper contracts, proper agreements that cover the whole life cycle. So that means admissions, recruitment, setting up of the partnership, but teaching and delivery, monitoring, but also, if necessary, how you close the partnership and whose responsibility is that, and where does that responsibility land. The other 3 principles, one is around that compliance, which I mentioned. You have to comply with the regulatory legislative requirements of the countries in which you're working. So whether it's Mexico, the UAE, Egypt, the UK provider needs to understand those regulatory rules. And that's where that partnership has to work. Students need to understand which institution is responsible for which part of their arrangement, of their support, their experience, and where they go to first get support. There needs to be proper records of everything that's been agreed. There's a formal agreement, but there is also a requirement that there is ongoing scrutiny, that there's regular review, regular periodic monitoring, evaluation, and also checking how things are in order to enhance, in order to develop. So that framework, if you like, is almost like a cornerstone of any UK provider's work around partnerships. It will help the provider think about what have they done? How are they going to deal with these things? It's not telling them they must do it, but it's certainly saying this is the areas you should be looking at. So the quality code principles and practices are supported by what we call advice and guidance documents. And we're about to publish the first 3 of those with the new code. And one of the first 3 is around partnerships, which tells you how important this area is for the UK. I said I'd talk a little bit about enhancement. So enhancement is like that continuous improvement. So the QAA has been responsible for what's called the Quality Evaluation Enhancement of the UK T&E scheme, otherwise known as QET&E. So that's a scheme where In England, universities can choose to join. In Scotland and Wales, it's a requirement to be in the scheme. And that scheme looks at a number of different things. It looks at partnerships, it does visits, we look at case studies, institutions develop case studies around transnational education, good practice, or things that haven't worked. We produce country guides on the areas in which we're looking at, and we also produce thematic pieces around risk, around partnerships, around the role of tutors. We're doing some work around the role of resources and students' access to resources from a T&E perspective. I'm probably going to link back to what was said earlier, really. So that we did publish a findings from the QE-T&E scheme. It's a public report. There's a link in the slides to the report. But that report focuses on the findings of the first 3 years, really. But I think we've put on this slide that understanding of systems, regulations, and environment and quality assurance is absolutely critical for a partnership to be effective and for that partnership to work. And I think the other thing is about the strategic fit and shared vision, about the partnership being a partnership, about working. And all of those things will help assure that the quality assurance and enhancement is also effective. Because if you've got mutual understanding of the rules, you've got mutual understanding of the regulations, then you've also got a shared understanding of how things might work. And I think that's me finished.
Thank you so much, Piers, and fantastic. I think that's a great overview, and I'm sure there will be questions for you at some point later. So we have now heard about the regulatory environment on a large scale from both contexts in Mexico and the UK. We are now going to move to our own institutions, in our case, the University of Portsmouth and FLACSO-Mexico, for insights into how transnational education works on both sides, as well as the challenges we have encountered when trying to implement these partnerships. On that note, I am glad to introduce Mark Shaw, who is the Partnerships Manager here at the University of Portsmouth, and who will discuss good practices when operationalizing T&E partnerships based on the years of experience that we have amassed here at the university. Over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm a bit of a newbie with Zoom. Thanks for your introduction, and I'm very pleased to be talking to everyone here, and particularly our colleagues who've joined from Mexico. Appreciate that. I want to focus on an overview of good practice and things you need to consider when you're forming and operationalising T&E partnerships. I work for our legal services team within corporate governance at Portsmouth. I want to focus on the delivery of programmes of learning in a country that leads to an award of credit made by an institution from a different country, a sort of broad definition of T&E. Consider the organisation making an award of credit to be an awarding body and the partner located in another country to be a delivery provider. And when I'm talking about another country, I'm not talking about a country outside the UK. It's bi-directional, so consider that as I go through this. So I'll put down 3 models here. If we classify it by who develops, designs and owns the curriculum that's being considered for an award, then there are 3 main models. There's a franchised curriculum, and that means the awarding body licenses its curriculum to a delivery provider. There's a validated curriculum, and that means the awarding body accredits the delivery provider's curriculum. And there's a joint curriculum, and the awarding body and delivery provider jointly develop, design, and own that curriculum. They may own it genuinely together, or they may retain ownership of each party's contribution, which is delivered as a whole. The delivery method, this could involve only the delivery provider in the simplest form. It can be across an academic term, concentrated in face-to-face intensive blocks. It could be face-to-face classroom taught, entirely online, or a blend of this. And there may be scope for a hybrid model whereby the awarding body either sends its own staff to undertake some of the teaching at the delivery provider, and that's often referred to as flying faculty, or it delivers remotely, either synchronously, which present in real time, or asynchronously recorded. Flying faculty can be prohibitively expensive and may make the awarding body liable for tax in the delivery provider's country. So that's something to be mindful of. Given this, any online delivery by the awarding body would probably work better asynchronously, given the time zone differences. And by delivery, we also need to consider not just the pedagogical aspects, but the support services that each party is able to provide and the feasibility of providing these. For example, if there's an organisation is less well resourced, they may be able to benefit from using the library services of another organisation, of the awarding body, for example. In terms of the award, in some T&E relationships, the delivery provider lacks the ability to make its own award of credit, and it needs the services of an awarding body. But where both parties are awarding bodies, there may be the opportunity for dual or double award, and obviously there are subtle differences that I won't go into here. But ostensibly, it's an award made by each awarding body on completion of the course. Students receive 2 separate award certificates, one from each awarding body. Or there's the capacity to do a joint award, which is conferred by each awarding body acting as one, with one award certificate. However, a joint award requires the awarding bodies to agree a joint set of awarding regulations and requires considerable effort to put in place. It's therefore not to be taken lightly. And in some circumstances, a joint award may not be permitted in the awarding body's internal founding documents or their constitution or by an external regulator. So it will be up to each awarding body to determine whether it's permitted to do so. First step for working together, they can start in 2 ways. It can be a strategic initiative which passes along and down through the institution, or as a grassroots effort where individuals connect with peers. It's based on shared interests usually, and then that goes up through the organisation and gains executive support. So be aware of that. It can happen either way. What is important is common interest and common goals are absolutely crucial. I know I'm touching on a lot of what peers have said. Whatever the initiative, there needs to be a common understanding within each institution and by each institution. There should be alignment of ideas, ideals, and goals, but those need to be tempered with realism. You need to have realistic ideas. Is the proposal educationally sound and beneficial for the learners? Can it be delivered effectively? Consider the language of instruction and assessment and whether there's enough expertise and capacity among both teaching and administrative staff to support it. Over-complexity can hinder things. Goals need to be realistic. Can the collaboration actually achieve the intended outcomes? If income is important, are the numbers realistic? Is there actually a market for what's being delivered? I think over-enthusiasm can blind people to this. And realistic timeframes. There's often the idea of a first mover advantage which creates real pressures to move quickly. The collaborations are inherently complex. Proposals must be clearly understood by all partner institutions, and appropriate governance and processes should match the scale and risk of the project. Time must also be allowed for external factors such as regulatory approvals if they apply. Institutional pressure can blind people to this. An idea shouldn't be confined to 2 people from different institutions. It needs to be explored, communicated internally, and then appropriately applied through the governance systems of each institution based on the nature of the arrangement. I think that leads on to the regulatory requirements. And again, echoing what Piers has said, fully understanding the requirements of each party is critical. Obvious to say here, there are internal regulatory requirements. Each institution will have its own internal policies and approval. But if you're a proposer, do you know what those are? Do you know who the key people are and what are the internal structures? Does the delivery have to be in a specific language, or is there flexibility to do that? It all takes time, and it's time not to be underestimated. Secondly, there's the external factors. These can come in a national or sector-based regulator. Sometimes it's a ministry, it's a government body. For certain subject areas, architecture, engineering, medicine, for example, it may be a discipline-based regulator. And bear in mind, there could be one in both countries. Do you know what the approval processes are, would be my question. Who the people are. That takes time to ascertain and takes time to go through. I think generally before things move too far, it's necessary to determine if the proposal is something that each party is legally permitted to undertake, as well as something it can actually physically undertake in terms of its capacity, and something that it can undertake in terms of its internal rules and those of any regulators. So you need the time to discuss it internally with academic administrative colleagues, time to convince others of its merit, time to discuss advantages, disadvantages, opportunities, and risk, time to think it through, to consider and distill it and simplify it if you can. In terms of due diligence, this means understanding your partner and the legal aspects of working together. It should be undertaken as early as possible and continue throughout the collaboration. Both sides should carry it out, and it should be a collaborative process of asking things of one another, information of one another. And you mustn't hesitate to request information, even if it is from a government organisation or a government-linked institution. There are three types, as you can see on the slide. Academic checks whether the partner has the people, infrastructure and resources to deliver the programme or services. For awarding bodies, it confirms what they're allowed to award. It should cover regulatory, accreditation requirements, staff qualifications, teaching and research resources, student recruitment, quality assurance, academic standards, and assessment processes. It also considers whether the student experience meets the expectations of both English and local regulators. Financial due diligence is about understanding if a partner organisation is financially stable. Things like credit reports, published accounts, and annual reports can help with this. It also checks if activities are financially sustainable, ensuring that the cost of participants' time and resources input to the project are balanced by the income, whether that be fees or grants or a mixture of those. Taxation advice should also be sought. Certain collaborations, especially if staff work across borders, can create tax liabilities in both countries. And remittance of money may be subject to withholding taxes or currency restrictions. Fees may be subject to value added or sales tax. And there's a growing trend for digital services, i.e. online learning, to be taxed in the country where they're received. So your student population could be very varied, and that could create all sorts of interesting implications. Things like insurance coverage should be reviewed. Finally, the legal due diligence ensures both parties have the legal authority to collaborate. For example, are third-party permissions needed? Are there local laws that affect the project? If staff work abroad, that advice is particularly crucial because it can affect tax and employment rights under local law. Due diligence also extends internally. You need to know yourself, and is your organisation capable of collaborating in such a way? Contract. There must be a legally binding contract between the parties that clearly sets out the duties and responsibilities of each of them. It needs to list the activities and what's ascribed to each. Since each party is relying on the other, it needs to contain boundaries of what's acceptable, financial arrangements and insurance coverage. It needs to address regulatory or legal compliance, such as anti-bribery, data protection, health and safety, quality, and these things would have ideally been identified through due diligence, legal and taxation advice, and discussion amongst the partners. Intellectual property ownership and how it's shared or licensed should be specified, including provisions for any new intellectual property created during the collaboration. It must cover what's being delivered, how, by whom, and what the status of the students are, the learners. It also needs to cover what happens if a party does not keep its promises and does not deliver or delivers poorly. And finally, must only be signed by someone authorised to do so. Management. This needs careful and coordinated academic and administrative management. Any collaboration does. There needs to be ample liaison by and between the relevant academic and administrative teams. Processes must be agreed and documented. The quality assurance process of the awarding body should be followed, ensuring curriculum changes are put through the awarding body's change management processes. Assessments and exams need to be secure. Mechanisms to support teaching staff development and to support the students through their life cycle from admission to alumni need to be discussed, agreed, and documented. And I think finally, collaboration should be genuine partnership. It must confer mutual benefits, and those should be complementary. They might not be the same exactly, but they should complement one another at the least. And despite some regulatory restrictions that themselves can seem or even be quite paternalistic, it is important not to take a colonising approach to partnerships and embed or impose a colonial mentality. No assumption should be made that one party knows how to approach something better than another. Partners should be partners in learning for learning. In terms of the regulatory system in place in England, which I think probably in terms of the OFS sits in the deficit-oriented manner of the spectrum, it often strictly expects certain outcomes that don't always easily translate to a local cultural context. Differences in languages, in the terms of words used to describe academic processes and things can vary, as well as can obviously the languages in the mother tongue between two partners. Customary operational differences and time zones may impede good communications. These are challenges to work with, not against. And assuming we have a common purpose, excellent, frequent, clear communication within and between parties is also vital. At the end of it, collaborations require ample communication, nurturing, support, goodwill, kindness, patience, trust to succeed. And without these, as in a human relationship, they will fall apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for walking us through all of those points, which, as you know, we have lived ourselves, and so I'm sure there will be questions later on. And now, last but not least, I would like to give the floor to our partner who is leading on the Mexico side, Professor Raúl Pacheco-Vega from FLACSO-Mexico, for insights into opportunities and challenges for TNE in Mexico. Thank you, Raúl. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, and thanks everybody for joining us. I'm delighted to be here, and I am very grateful to be part of this project. I'm going to be presenting. I am a full professor at FLACSO-Mexico, but I am presenting in a way both combined in as the co-PI for this HE Connects project, but also I'm also going to be talking as someone who is learning the landscape of TNE. So my presentation will look at some of the things that I think are opportunities and challenges for TNE in Mexico from the perspective of someone who is coming to TNE through the project that I'm co-leading with Dr. Jacqueline Priego. So delighted to be here. So what is transnational education? And I think we've been talking a lot about it, but I don't know if we actually got to the point where we talked about transnational education, the definition. So what I did is I went to the UNESCO Code of Good Practice in the provision of transnational education, which was signed in Riga in 2001. And transnational education is defined as all types of higher education study programs or sets of courses of study or educational services, including those of distance education, in which the learners are located in a country different from the one where the awarding institution is based. Such programs may belong to the education system of a state different from the state in which it operates, or may operate independently of any national education system. And this is an important definition, because when we try to classify modes of transnational education, it becomes a lot more complicated when we see that there are different ways to blend them and hybridize them. So at this point, I'm trying to make sense of how we do transnational education, and previous speakers have actually provided us with a great overview of the regulatory landscape in the UK and Mexico. And now what I'm going to talk about is a lot of how we think and how we've seen some experiments of TNE in Mexico, and the development of those experiments, how they may be probably better done, and how we are experimenting with them in my institution, and also the potential that we see. Okay, I'm trying to see how to advance my slides, and apparently it doesn't. Okay, there we go. So there are a few very common models of TNE, and so I decided to find some examples in Mexico of transnational education that are not specifically to the UK. They're not specific to the UK, but they are broad ranging. So for example, there are foreign universities that set an entire campus in a different country, like branch campuses, the Arkansas State University Querétaro. There are local institutions, franchisees, that deliver a foreign universities program under a license, which is the franchisor, like Universidad Europea in Mexico, which is a Spanish university. There are joint degree programs where students take some courses in one country and others in the other country, earning joint degrees, like Colegio de Mexico CIENSPO, with a Master's of Urban Governance. And there are distance learning programs where entire programs is delivered across border, like the Universidad Internacional de La Rioja, which is also another Spanish university. There's a couple of interesting examples of TNE in Mexico, powered by ASU, Arizona State University. And this is a private university, Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara. ASU is not private, and ASU is public, but they are supporting joint degrees and blended learning as well. You can earn your degree by doing some online learning and then going and visiting ASU during certain periods of time and so on. I do know people who have obtained PhDs in this model. So this is an interesting way of doing TNE. The second one is the Universidad Internacional de La Rioja, UNIR, which provides undergrad or masters that are certified by the Mexican Secretariat of Public Education with European quality. These are just two examples. There's many more that you can see. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for TNE in Mexico. I think that Mexico faces a growing demand for international education, but not everybody can actually access international education. So a small percentage of students have the means to study abroad. Also, TNE could potentially offer local access to foreign credentials, which enables access that would not be possible otherwise. And there are multiple schemes that we can explore for those international and transnational education. And exploring those as binational teams seems like a very productive strategy. And that's exactly what we're doing with the project, with the HE Connects project on TNE's capacity strengthening by University of Portsmouth and FLACSO-Mexico. So what is FLACSO? FLACSO is my institution, the Latin American Faculty for Social Sciences. There are FLACSOs in practically all of Latin America. We have 18 member states. There's academic activities in 15 countries at 3 levels: the headquarters, programs, projects, and we have had more than 19,000 graduates at the postgraduate level. FLACSO does not have undergraduate programs. We only have master's and PhD level programs, plus other ranges of different programs. It's an academic international regional organization, and there's FLACSO in Chile, FLACSO Cuba, FLACSO Guatemala, Ecuador, etc. I am proud to be a faculty member at FLACSO-Mexico. We were founded in 1975. We turned 50 this year, which is, we are doing a lot of events and projects related to the fact that we are now turning 50. we are a public institution. We are not private. We are a public institution that is aimed to train high-level social scientists to contribute to the analysis and generation of proposed solutions for national and regional public affairs in Latin America. We're a research and training center. So we have 4 full-time programs registered with the National Postgraduate System of the National Council of Humanities, Sciences, and Technologies, now the Secretariat for Research, Humanities, and Technologies, the CT. We have 5 graduate programs in the blended learning program where we do distance education, but also we have on-site learning sessions, and we have, those are master's programs. Our full-time programs are 3 master's programs and 1 PhD with 3 different specializations: sociology, political science, and public policy. And we have 4 diploma programs that have been established, but also we provide workshops and courses available to the general public. As such, we don't have an international office, but the academic secretariat is related, is tasked with, among other things, they do a lot of other work, but among the other things that they do is they establish the international partnerships and connections as well. So as I said, Mexico engages in academic activities related to social science research, develops and delivers training and higher education programs, as well as specialized training. We undertake rigorous social science research in sociology. We have 3 specializations: sociology, political science, and public policy. We do have students who use different methods, for example, geographical spatial analysis methods or social network analysis. So because we have a methods lab, which is the lab that I'm associated with, we have a central line on methods that, regardless of the discipline, allows researchers and grad students to complete their degrees with a broad range of methods. And we collaborate with multiple national and international universities and institutions, as well as similar teaching and research organizations. So we do have some FLACSO activities that might fall into TNE from the perspective of Mexico being the outward country, so the country that is exporting programs. So we have the program on advanced research, on advanced studies in methods, the PAM, Programa de Estudios Avanzados en Métodos. These are short courses, 1 week, 15 hours on specific social science research methods. And we have a lot of students, because this is a distance learning opportunity, we have a lot of students from other countries and other institutions that take these courses. So in this case, the country from where TNE is exported is Mexico towards other countries in Latin America and the world. And we have also a program with the International Political Science Association, the IPSA FLACSO Summer School. These are medium-length courses usually taught in English by foreign university-based scholars on specific social science methods like field experiments, quantitative analysis, etc. And these are preceded by 1 week short courses in Spanish on foundations of methods. This is blended because some of the international faculty are based in a different university. So this would be sort of TNE from those universities to FLACSO, but we also then deliver this knowledge to other countries. So that's sort of a two-pronged approach. So I've also been thinking about challenges that TNE may present in Mexico, which is one of them. Actually, there's a lot of things that made me think about these issues that have been clarified with the earlier presentations, but still, I think it's important to post them here and post them for the conversation for the question. So the first one is the bidirectionality. So should always the foreign institutions be the content delivery in Mexico, or should we also push for Mexican institutions to engage in outward TNE from Mexico to the world, or should it be bidirectional TNE? And that, I think it's an interesting question, because as Piers and Mark presented in earlier iterations, and also Arturo and Adan did as well in their presentations, the requirement to respect local customs, language, and learning processes and regulatory frameworks makes it easier to think about the possibility for bidirectional TNE. So this is important. Quality assurance, we had this discussion today, but I still wanted to make sure that we touch on this. So how can we guarantee that all TNE is vetted in a way that ensures TNE is up to international standards? there are degree meals, there are diploma meals. This is an entire field of study in education and education policy, and you know this, but how do we guarantee that the T&E that is being delivered is actually up to standards? I think there's also the point where we, for example, in the UK, Mexico, standards, I think there needs to be a conversation between the UK regulatory authorities and the Mexican regulatory authorities. And I'm delighted that we have many participants here from ANUYES, and we will have another seminar, dialogue seminar at the end of the month in Spanish with other participants and authorities as well, that may help us to sort of cement this and our understanding of the regulatory frameworks and the landscape in Mexico and abroad. And finally, the regulatory framework. How could the regulatory landscape be simplified and harmonized to facilitate T&E? And Mark and Pierce also said that the quality assurance processes need to be sort of harmonized so that the T&E content delivery is fulfills the quality assurance standards in both countries. And that requires also not only the conversations between the universities, but also the conversations between the regulatory bodies. I think that is one particular area where I think there's plenty of opportunities. I wouldn't want to call these challenges as such, but sort of opportunities that can be addressed with conversations and with dialogue seminars like the ones that we're organizing as well. So, charting a pathway forward for T&E in Mexico, there are here 5 considerations that I wanted to present. The first one is one that we're working on with the University of Portsmouth as a team, which is micro-credentials, which have the potential to enhance T&E in yet another hybrid model where we could do joint delivery, franchising, and distance education, but it's sort of 2 universities, one in the UK, one in Mexico, and the micro-credential is validated in both, and this is something that we're working on right now. Broad regulatory harmonization between EU and Mexico would probably be a very useful approach, and this is sort of a stepping stone where I think the British Council Mexico, which with the HE Connects grants, is doing a great job in setting sort of this framework for these conversations and regulatory harmonization. Success stories of UK-Mexico collaborations also are useful. The more we know about this, and I know we have some documents, but also the British Council in Mexico, the office in Mexico, is doing a really great effort, is pushing a great effort to really highlight the success stories. And I think those might be useful to encourage HAE, higher education institutions to engage in T&E. There's an open call for grant proposals right now for HE Connects 2025. So you may want to look into those. Also, the post-pandemic normalization of online content delivery provides fertile ground for a broad range of T&E initiatives. We could start with, harmonizing the online content and then harmonizing at the same time the regulatory frameworks. And the content harmonization and language alignment are also important elements to consider. This dialogue seminar is being held in English, and we've had conversations in the project and through the project team on how we could deliver the same content in a language that is harmonized between both countries. Obviously, English is the language of the world, but also, if we are in Mexico, we may want to deliver micro-credentials, for example, in Spanish, and we are very lucky that in our team we have a lot of Spanish speakers, so this facilitates the effort. These are my contact details. You can find me on X, Blue Sky, Facebook, and also you can drop me an email. Thank you so very much. I hope I didn't run too much of my time.
Thank you, Raúl. That's absolutely not a problem. And thank you everyone for being here. And I am mindful of time just now, and I would like to keep it exactly to the time that we scheduled for this. So we have roughly 2 minutes for one question for anyone who I know it is a lot of content, but I think it is valuable content precisely for the objectives of our project, which is capacity strengthening. I'm going to stop now to see if there is any questions. You can drop it on the chat or take the floor now. Well, I think it has been a lot, as I said, of content, hopefully very stimulating for everyone. I would like just to take this opportunity. Oh, thank you, Natalie, for being here and for your feedback. And for those of you joining us either from Mexico or who can follow Spanish, we'll shortly be sharing the details of another of our dialogue seminars. This one is going to be in Spanish, in keeping with the bilateral nature of this project. And this is going to have the participation of the Department for Business and Trade from the UK in Mexico, as well as ANUYES. And it will take place on the 30th of June, and it will have a focus on networking for universities in Mexico, and we hope to have many of you there. In the meantime, we'll be sharing, thank you so much, Arturo. We'll be sharing the slides with all of you, and we'll be following up with communications about the possibility of all of the attendees to this session being part of a community of practice that shares good practice events and resources in relation to transnational education between the UK and Mexico. Thank you so much, and all the best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks a lot. Can we stop the recording, Jane?